I want to welcome everybody out today. Thanks for coming. I'd like to thank Heidi for coming out to give this presentation to us. So to start out, reminder, make sure you sign in, make sure you sign up for the activity on USANA first, so you get the credit for it. But I'll give a little introduction to Heidi. So Heidi is a native of Colorado and one of 12 children. Her path in medicine began in a pediatric clinic during high school, followed by training and working as an emergency medical technician during college. She received her Bachelor of Science of Nursing degree from Brigham Young University in 1999 and has devoted her bedside nursing career largely to adult critical care. Heidi attended the University of Utah, where she completed her Doctorate of Nursing Practice degree. She is board certified as a family nurse practitioner. Heidi loves the variety of family medicine and the opportunity to form long-term health partnerships with whole families and patients of all ages. Special interest areas include preventive medicine, women's health, pediatrics, concussion care, and mental wellness. Heidi is passionate about education and frequently teaches community seminars about various health topics. Knowledge is power, and the key to health is understanding how your body works and how to take care of it. Heidi is happily married and has 4 children. One daughter passed away shortly after birth due to Potter's syndrome, which spurred her to devote 8 years to infant bereavement support. She spearheaded grassroots efforts to create appropriate clothing for babies who pass away shortly before or after birth, learned photography and retouching skills to be able to capture priceless memories for families, and created an informational website. In her spare time, you can usually find Heidi somewhere on a trail. Hiking is happiness, she says. She loves to explore new places and is insatiably curious. Heidi has run several marathons, half marathons, and competed in several triathlons, including a half Ironman distance. She enjoys spending time with her family and friends, classical music, and excellent food. So I will turn the time over to Heidi Baudry.
Thanks for all being here today. I hope that you find this a good use of your lunch hour. Can the people in the back hear me okay? Okay. Please, if you're like, oh, I can hear you, let's do this, and I'll speak louder. So I prefer that over standing behind a microphone. So Michael came and heard me give this presentation as church conjugation. I modified this a little bit for a corporate setting. But what we'll be covering today is some basic brain biology. We'll be talking about how changes in our brain biology alter our physical response. So how depression and anxiety cause other physical symptoms. What depression and anxiety look like and what self-help and professional help look like. So we'll go through it kind of in that order. So let's start out with some neurotransmitters. I'm assuming that because you guys work in a health and wellness environment, that you're familiar with some of these terms and some of the brain biology, but we'll review it anyway. The neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that take a signal from one neuron to the next. The neurons are not physically connected. They have to have these chemicals to carry those messages across. Some of them are inhibitory and some are excitatory, and you need a nice balance of both in order for everything to run smoothly. The ones that we'll be talking about the most are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine is not as big in the brain biology, but it's there. Serotonin is the big one that you'll hear talked about a lot, and that's because it's so important in regulating mood and sleep. And when either one of those things are out of whack, people don't feel good. The other really important aspects of serotonin is that it inhibits pain. And that's why one of the important things that I assess when people come see me in clinic and they say, I have these chronic headaches and they just came out of nowhere when my stress at work really ramped up and I can't figure out why I have all these headaches all the time. Or they have some injury that has really gone into a chronic state and they've not healed from it the way that I would expect. Like the pain has not resolved, or they have chronic abdominal pain. This can be a sign of a serotonin imbalance because they have more pain than you would expect. We'll talk more about how it regulates sleep, appetite, and mood, but just rest assured that if you don't have enough serotonin in your life, you're going to have a hard time feeling a lot of joy. Dopamine's a big one. Who here has heard of Parkinson's disease? Okay. My dad has it. He's in advanced stages of Parkinson's. He's had it for about 15 years. It's a disease where the cells that produce dopamine in your brain start to shrivel up and die. So we try and give it to them orally with Cinemax, levodopa, carbidopa. That's a drug that doesn't metabolize very well, doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier very well. So you have to give really, really high doses to get any of it into their brain. They tend to have a ton of side effects and not such great drug effects. But it's a movement disorder. It's also a mood disorder. So people who have problems with dopamine in their brain have problems moving the way they should. So when you think of someone who has low dopamine, you should think of someone who looks kind of like a slug, like they have a hard time getting them out of bed in the morning, and they're just slow, and they don't want to do anything. They don't have any motivation. The other really important aspect of dopamine is that it influences your perception of reality. And in this case, I had a patient that came to clinic just a week or so ago, and I've treated other members of his family, so I know his family fairly well. And he said, I just feel like such a failure. I feel like I haven't done anything good with my life. I feel like, other people have done so much more that are in my same age group. And I said, you know what, I think that if we talk to your wife and to your coworkers, they'd say, he's a really good dad. He's very dedicated to his family. He's a hard worker. He's kind to other people, but his own perception of his own performance and his own self-worth was altered by not enough dopamine in his system. Norepinephrine is our fight or flight hormone. Good in small doses when you need to escape a tiger or a gunman running loose in your neighborhood, like what happened in our neighborhood over the weekend. Not good long-term, just spurting out there, causing all sorts of cardiac stimulation. It's definitely also associated with motivation and reward. So those are the three main neurotransmitters that a lot of medications target. Other neurotransmitters that are important are acetylcholine, which is the counterbalance to dopamine. So when dopamine and acetylcholine balance is off, then that's where you get mood disorder. Glutamate, and then gamma-aminobutyric acid. And the GABA receptors are really important in alcohol metabolism. People who drink a lot, drink daily, they upregulate the number of GABA receptors in their brain. And GABA typically calms us down. But when you all of a sudden stop drinking all at once, you've got all these receptors and they make up stuff to do. And that's where alcohol withdrawals come from. So I've taken care of hundreds and hundreds of people in my intensive care unit when I was doing bedside nursing with alcohol withdrawal symptoms, seizures and hallucinations and severe spikes in their heart rate and blood pressure and stuff because the GABA receptors ran out of things to do. They didn't have anything to fill those receptors. So there are a lot of over-the-counter supplements for GABA. That's what medications like Valium or Ativan or Xanax, they hit those GABA receptors. So, little brain biology. We have our little lizard brain here. That's what I like to call this part, where we have the amygdala, the hippocampus, and then the thalamus here in the center, and then the prefrontal cortex. My kids tire of me telling them all the time, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. You're not capable of making sound decisions. Okay, not until you're 25 that fully develops. When someone is under chronic amounts of stress, for those of you that are interested in these slides, by the way, I'll be sending a copy of them to Michael, and so that he can send them out to the company so you can get them by email. So don't feel like you need to take tons of notes unless you want to. Anyway, so back to the prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making, for executive function, for being the filter as your brain's kicking out ideas. Your prefrontal cortex is supposed to slow those things down. Chronic stress can actually cause the prefrontal cortex to shrink, physically shrink. Some of those cells die off, they aren't replaced, and so that inhibits your ability to make good decisions and to be able to think and have those interactions the way you think you should. Same thing happens to the hippocampus. The amygdala and the hippocampus are the areas where when you experience a traumatic situation, they respond to that. And when someone has experienced trauma once and another little stimulus comes along that just reminds them of that bad thing that happened, then you get this explosive reaction from that. And that's where like PTSD and those things come from. The hippocampus definitely is another part of the brain that suffers when someone's chronically depressed over a long time. It can functionally shrink. It can literally become smaller. So when people say, it's all in your head, you can say, yeah, it actually is. Well, also in my gut. We'll get to that. So people ask me all the time, what causes depression? Depression is actually a symptom of other things going on in your body. So is anxiety. And there's a lot of things that go into that. That's like saying, what caused your cough? Well, I could list off to you 50 things off the top of my head that could cause a cough. So depression is like that. It's a symptom of an issue. So anytime someone has been exposed to trauma at an early age, that can change how the amygdala and the hippocampus and the thalamus respond to future threats. And there's a survey that we use that's called the Adverse Childhood Events Survey, and it asks 9 questions. It's things like, have you been exposed to violence? Were your parents divorced? Have you ever witnessed, something violent? Have you ever had sexual molestation or those kinds of things against you? And the higher your score is on that, the much more likely, the much more likely you are to have health problems and even have early death. And it strongly correlates not just with mental problems, but also with physical problems, because it changes the structure of your brain and how to respond to those threats in the future. Genetics are huge. Definitely runs in families. Just like so many other systems in your body, some people can eat a pound of bacon every day, and their total cholesterol is still 110. And their triglycerides are beautiful. They have like this amazing genetic vacuum cleaner to suck the bacon particles out of their bloodstream. I don't know, good for them. The rest of us have like one piece of chocolate and blood sugar shoots up, and so there's genetic predisposition to this. All of us have a certain amount of neurotransmitter in our brain, right? Some of us have big tanks of neurotransmitters, and some of us have little itty bitty tanks. So if you only have the milk carton-sized tank of extra serotonin in your life, and you're under a lot of stress, and your brain's like, help, I need more serotonin, you're going to go through your food storage pretty quickly. Whereas some people just have the 10-gallon tank, and they're good. They can cruise through every crisis in their life, and they're still smiling on the other side. So that's really a strong genetic predisposition. And one of the things I ascertain when I'm doing an assessment in clinic is like, tell me about the rest of your family. Tell me, like, if they do have mood disorders, tell me what those look like. What age did they come on? What kind of medications have worked for them? Because a lot of the times there's similarities there. Life circumstances for sure play into this. I can think of several patients I've cared for that were in the middle of like a divorce or a death or some other really traumatic circumstance, and have what I call an acute stress reaction. And so this is their body's overwhelmed with the need for extra neurotransmitters just in this situation. And as soon as that situation is resolved, they'll be able to rebound from that, and they'll be back to baseline, and they'll be okay. And so in these cases, short-term treatment is very, very appropriate. Just need to get them over that hump, to get them through that. Brain structure. So anytime someone has a structural abnormality, whether that looks like a tumor or something from epilepsy, or they got a concussion, okay, that's huge. Concussions are huge. And the reason that I spent a lot of time in my doctoral project on concussion is because my son got a concussion when he was 13, and it sparked 2 years of mood disorders and daily migraines. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's super, super common for concussions to spark long-term changes in mood if it's not handled appropriately. Gut dysfunction. Okay, I bet you didn't know that most of your neurotransmitters are made in your guts by happy, happy little bacteria. Okay, there's more bacterial cells in you than there are people cells. That's your gross fact for the day. So, think about it. You're just a walking wad of bacteria. They're just smaller than our human cells, so that's why we don't feel like we're just shedding bacteria. I don't know. Gross. You guys are eating your lunch. Sorry about that. Anyway, so your gut is I've been watching a really fascinating series. In fact, I purchased it and I'm anxious for it to come in the mail. About by Mark Hyman. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a big guy in the functional medicine arena. And his whole mission is to teach people how to eat correctly and how that influences mood and other physical wellness. But this whole concept of if your gut's not happy, then it's going to have a hard time producing those neurotransmitters that you need. Also, there are more serotonin receptors in your gut than there are in your head. And so if things are out of whack, it makes sense that people would have digestive disturbances as part of this syndrome. Anytime there's additional medical disorders, those can either factor into it or make it worse. And so the first thing I do when I assess someone for depression is I do some basic screening lab work, depending on what their symptoms are that they present with. And one of the common things we see is really, really catastrophically low vitamin D levels. And if these people were to just take the RDA of 1,000 IUs, they'd never get them anywhere. The lab ranges on most of the labs locally say 30 to 80 or 30 to 100 is in range, but the way they determine those ranges is just by testing a whole bunch of people's blood. And so it's like, oh, the population average is 30 to 80, so I guess that's pretty good. I tell you, it's so rare when I have people come in, it's like, wow, you actually have decent vitamin D. In our clinic, our target is to get people above 60 for optimal mental health functioning. So that's a huge one, and that's an easy fix. And it's something that's subtle, like people won't take their supplement and then feel like they're super happy the very next day. It takes time to get your body stores back up to where you're functioning well that way. Sleep apnea. Oh my goodness, that's a big one. If people aren't getting that restorative sleep at night, that's when your brain takes out the garbage. So if you don't get the garbage cleared out, of course you're going to wake up feeling foggy and tired and low motivation and have some things that mimic depression. Thyroid dysfunction is huge. There's so many things. Testosterone in males. I've had a couple of interesting ones lately where I had gentlemen with very high hematocrits that were not using testosterone or other things that could cause that. And so one I diagnosed with polycythemia vera and the other with hemochromatosis. And in both of these cases, those were contributing to their exhaustion. So you have to be sure that you're not saying, oh, you're tired, I think that you're depressed, and just throw a medication with that. There's so many other things that need to be investigated. Substance abuse is huge. When someone takes a drag on a cigarette, they get an immediate dump of dopamine. And it's the type of dopamine dump that nothing else can mimic or replicate. And it is the most addictive substance. It's the hardest to get off of because the way it just spikes that dopamine. Take another drag, spike the dopamine. You cannot get that same spike from Nicorette or from the patch or any of those kinds of things. And the brain gets used to that. It craves that, and it makes more receptors, giving you more dopamine. So any addictions get to that dopamine reward system, but nicotine in particular is really bad that way. I have what I call the mud puddle principle here. This is two little doggies that went through the same puddle. The little guy looks like he's had a really bad day, right? He's like, I nearly drowned going through that puddle. The big guy's like, that was fun, let's do it again. Maybe this time I'll roll around in it. This is what I like to call the long legs theory, that there are times in our life where we have short legs. We go through something and it feels overwhelming and it just knocks us on our butt. And it's hard to recover from that. There's other times when we're in a good place mentally and physically, we've taken good care of ourselves, where we have long legs, so we can go through these same bumps, a difficult semester, a period at work where you're required to work 12-hour days back to back, and you come out on the other side just with muddy ankles and you're okay. This is also applicable to that sometimes you have two people that go through the very same experience. For instance, the shooter situation was in our neighborhood paramount. Maybe I'm naive, but I was like, it's close by, but I don't feel immediate threat. Other people in my neighborhood were very, very, very anxious about it and very worked up about it and still talking about it on Sunday. And then we got a message from our principal this morning. So same experience, two different outcomes. Two people went through it and had a very different experience with it. So the question is, how do you know if you're depressed? The main thing that, especially when I teach this to young people, is I want to teach them life is full of ups and downs. All of us have a bad day or a bad 2 days or even a bad week, and that doesn't mean you're depressed. But when you have something that is just sucking you down and it's pulling you down and you cannot pull out of it, something that normally you'd be able to rebound from, then you need to start thinking this way. So by the DSM-5 criteria, you have to have at least 2 weeks or more days than not. You're having these persistence of symptoms. Like I said before, you also have to rule out other health problems that can mimic it. And in terms of risk, Young people and women are at greater risk. I especially see this, I see so many 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds in clinics. There's been a sharp increase in the incidence of anxiety and depression in our young people just since about 2010. Anyone want to hazard a guess what happened around 2010 that might have affected our young people and continues to?
Economic crisis.
Let's say that again. The economic crisis, that could be part of it. Yeah. Social media. That's when smartphones became a lot more ubiquitous. Everyone has a smartphone now. And there's tons of data that shows there's a strong correlation between the number of hours they spend per day on their screen and the incidence of anxiety and depression, no matter what they're looking at. Whether it's social media, whether it's, I don't know, playing Jewel Bedazzled, whatever, I don't play these games. My kids play them, the Cliff Runner, I don't know, all these games. 5 hours and your kid is at high risk for depression and anxiety. If you keep it below 2 hours, which is what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends, then there's a much, much exponentially lower risk. So this is just something to be mindful of for both yourselves, because I think these same things apply to adults. I mean, we like to think that it doesn't, that we're mature and able to control our social media consumption, but the reality is that we're not very good at it. But also for your kids and grandkids and other people around you. When I have someone in clinic, I don't know if you guys can see my little cartoon, and it shows the guy rolling out of bed, finally makes it down on the floor and says, "You did it! Good job." This is a person with low dopamine. Okay, getting moving is really, really hard for this person. When someone's in clinic, I talk to them about all these categories. Sleep disturbances are incredibly common because serotonin and melatonin need to be in balance to initiate and to maintain sleep. So people tell me either I'm sleeping all the time, I wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, get my kids out the door, and then I go back to sleep. That's a problem. Also, if they tell me I go to sleep okay, but then I suddenly wake up at 3 a.m. and I can't go back to sleep for a couple of hours, then that's another symptom of a serotonin and melatonin imbalance. So I always ask about those kinds of things. Interest is a big one. I'll say, what do you like to do for fun? And if they say, well, I used to enjoy fill in the blank, going hiking, going and doing things with my family, those kinds of things. But now that just feels overwhelming. Then that's a red flag to me. I ask about their feelings of guilt or worthlessness. That's that low dopamine thing kicking in. Like this gentleman that I took care of that said, I just feel like such a failure. When I know that that's not how his family perceives him at all. But he has those feelings of guilt and worthlessness that are associated with that low dopamine state. Energy is a huge one. Most of the time people come into the clinic with a complaint of fatigue. You know, that seems easier to say out loud than I think I'm depressed. But you can come in for fatigue and we can investigate that. But they'll just say, I just never feel good. I feel terrible all the time. Concentration is a big one. People will say, I think I developed ADD in the last year. Well, here's a news flash for you. The criteria for an ADHD diagnosis is that you have to have had these symptoms before age 12. Okay, because it's a structural imbalance in your brain, structural chemical imbalance in your brain. So for people to suddenly develop ADHD as an adult, that's a red flag for me that it's anxiety or depression, most likely. Or we need to rule out some other possible cognitive causes. But that's that shrinking prefrontal cortex. Okay, it takes a hit, doesn't work well. Any changes in the appetite, some people eat their feelings and some people stop eating. So wide swings in weight, either way are of concern. Changes in movement, so when they're like, hey, are you moving so slow that your friends are like, come on, you need to get out of bed, and it looks like this, that's the thing. Also, some people get really agitated and they can't sit down and they can't focus and they can't wind down. That's also a sign. The most important thing I ask, though, is any thoughts of self-harm. And it's really common for people to tell me that they have passive thoughts of dying. Like, I guess it wouldn't be that bad if I just didn't wake up tomorrow, you know, but I wouldn't do anything to hurt myself. I don't have any plans, those kinds of things. I'm less worried about something like that than someone who says, yeah, I've got a bottle of pills left over from my last surgery, and I've thought about taking it. Yeah, I thought about it. I worry a lot more about that. We'll talk more about suicide prevention at the end. Here's a little grid that shows you the different categories of symptoms that you may see in a depressed person. First, we have our emotions. When I asked a bunch of teens, what do you think of when you think of depression? And now we're like, crying, really sad. That's part of it. But you don't have to be crying all the time to be depressed, okay? A lot of times, actually, these people are the masters of disguise and can put on a happy face and can keep going, and you wouldn't know that really inside they're really, really struggling. These other things, mood swings and irritability, I especially see that with men and women too, but a lot of men, their wives dragging them because like, I just can't deal with this anymore. I can't live with this cranky man that comes home from work every day. The irritability is a big factor there. For physical symptoms, we have substance abuse, unexplained aches and pains. We'll go more into that. Sleep problems, loss of motivation, weight changes, chronic fatigue, low energy. Thoughts, it's that impaired memory and concentration, indecisiveness. I had a patient tell me just this week, she was like, I can't even go grocery shopping. If I make the entire list and write down the brand and the exact number of everything I'm supposed to buy, then that's okay. But then that takes me like 3 hours at home to decide what I want to put on my list. It's just, I can't just go to the grocery store and say, this looks good, because it's just overwhelming. I can't make any decisions right now. And then confusion, a lot of that, thoughts of death and suicide. Behavior-wise, anytime I see someone withdrawing from their friends or social responsibilities or just barely functioning, like go to work, come home, and you hide in your cave. Teens, you worry about that, especially if they just go to school, come home, then they're hiding out in their room. And then changes in appearance. That's a big thing. It's one of the things that I chart on, is their hygiene and their appearance. Because the people are horrendously depressed, and they come in and they're stinky, and their hair is stringy and greasy, and it doesn't look like they brushed their teeth for a couple weeks, no lie. Like, that's one of those things. And then as they're getting better, then one day they'll walk into the clinic and they've got a smile on their face and clean clothes and their hair is combed. And they know they're doing better. Part of my assessment. Some of these physical symptoms can include abdominal pain or digestive disturbances that go along with that. Chest pain. I would say 95% of the time when someone 30 or younger comes into the emergency with chest pain is anxiety. It is not a heart attack. But they get heart attack workup, but it's not a heart attack. Almost always, it's something different. Oh, excuse me. Exhaustion and fatigue, changes in weight, backaches, chronic muscle pain, all these things are signals you don't have enough serotonin and there's something going on in your body. Meanwhile, with their altered perception of reality, they think they have cancer and Ebola and Zika virus and a few other things going with that. Let's talk about children and teens. Kids, especially younger kids, don't have the personal awareness capability when they're having like a stomach ache to understand the connection between, what's going on in their head and what's going on in their tummy. And so they're much more likely to come to you complaining of tummy aches every day. And it's easy to blow them off and be like, you're just a hypochondriac. There's nothing wrong. You're not throwing up. You don't have diarrhea, whatever. Why do you have a little camper? But this is their physical manifestation of their mood disturbance. I also really, really worry about teens because they're impulsive. They have a bad day. They flunk a test, they wreck your car, they broke up with their girlfriend, and they thought that was their one true love forever and ever and ever and ever, and they're heartbroken, so they do something stupid. That prefrontal cortex doesn't filter and say, slow down there, tiger, you don't need to take that bottle of pills. Boys especially are likely to do something impulsive with a lethal means, a gun or a rope or suffocating themselves in a car, those kinds of things. So 7 out of 10 suicide attempts in youth are by girls, but 7 out of 10 completions are by boys because they tend to use more lethal means. I do teach a youth suicide prevention class, and I'll have the information later on in the slides if you're interested in coming to that. I teach it out in the community. It's really important information. You really need to watch for a decline in school performance. That's one of the things that often spurs parents to bring their kids in. It's like, hey, this is a straight A student, and all of a sudden they're getting C's. Something's going on. Seniors, when you look at the curve of who commits suicide, we talk about youth suicide a lot because that's the leading cause of death in that age group, and it's preventable. And that's because they don't have diabetes or cancer, all of these other things going on. Okay, so you look at the curve, we've got the youth down here, and it steadily climbs to adulthood. And the highest population for suicides are elderly males. Okay? So we need to watch for those social isolation, anyone that's not getting contact. This is where programs like Meals on Wheels are critical. Reaches out to these people that otherwise don't have contact, and that may literally save their life. The other thing is that a lot of times when elderly people are in fact depressed, it looks like they're just developing dementia. So it takes an astute clinician and a good assessment to make sure that you're not just writing them off as like, this is progressive dementia, you've lost your marbles and they're never coming back. But maybe it's depression. Let's move on to anxiety. I love anxiety girl here. She's able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound, right? One of my patients is super anxious, terrible, terrible anxiety. Someone else had started on Celexa, which is a common medication for that. And then she started getting anxious thinking, what if there's a natural disaster and I won't have access to my Celexa? I don't want to be reliant on something that I might not have access to if there's the earthquake. And so she weaned herself off, and that was catastrophic for everyone involved, you know. She went about 6 months without any medication, was over family medicine. She came back to me, but then she comes into me, she's like, so do you think you could prescribe double the amount so I can start hoarding some? And I'm like, no, I cannot do that. No hoarding, take your pills. Anyway, so anxiety can produce these symptoms that are very, very uncomfortable for people. Pounding hearts and sweating and tremor and, you know, a lot of stomach issues with that. Either really, really fast or really, really slow transit. Yay, everyone's favorite. Fatigue, insomnia. This is an interesting thing is the frequent urination, especially I have a lot of parents with little anxious girls. They bring their girls and they're like, I think she has a UTI, and check the urine and it's just fine. Well, she's peeing all the time. Let's talk about some other causes of anxiety. The worst part, I think, for these people is just this constant feeling of dread or worry about things that they can't control. It's a very overwhelming burden to carry all the time. Be worrying about literally everything. Like, some of my teeth, I think they looked at me funny. They must think I'm a terrible person. Whatever I said was stupid, and they're replaying over and over in their head every single thing they've said that day. The other person has no recollection of that conversation they moved on, but the person with anxiety is stuck and is consumed by how other people perceive them and whether they're going to do the wrong thing. Definitely it can interfere with concentration, and this is another thing, is that anxiety and ADHD can often be mixed with each other. I love Awkward Yeti. Has anyone ever heard of Awkward Yeti? It's one of my favorite cartoons, because I'm a nerd and I love biology and things like that, but Awkward Yeti is fun. They have heart and brain is always cerebral and very logical, and heart is off chasing butterflies, okay? So heart says, hey brain, is there anything we can do to help you with your anxiety? And brain says, I don't know. And the stomach says, what if I control myself like this? And bowels say, and I'll move things along really fast or really slow, depending on your preference. Well, I don't. And then heart says, I'll just pump as fast as my little knee can pump. What is that even? And then the eyeballs say, and just one of us will twitch from time to time. You all look ridiculous. Does that mean it's working? They say. And that's really anxiety in a nutshell. Your body is like rebelling against you. You don't want to feel like that all the time. You don't want your eyeballs to be twitching and your heart to be pounding, but just that norepinephrine coming along making misery for you. The same neurotransmitters that are responsible, there's some overlap. Dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. They all play a little bit more or less into depression and anxiety, but essentially it's those same group of three. So the same medication classes are used for depression and the same ones are used for anxiety. Interestingly, most people with anxiety are just used to that baseline worry, and they wait a lot longer, like upwards of 10 plus years to seek help for that. So they just live in that cave of misery all that time without seeking help for it. And there's a lot of different types of anxiety. That would include like agoraphobia or fear of spiders. All those things are under the umbrella of anxiety disorders. The ones that I see most often are generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. So to get help. I think all of us are on a spectrum of some level of depression or anxiety. A little bit of anxiety is good. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. It's like if you don't get up and go to work, you're gonna lose your job, right? So a little bit of anxiety is good. When do you flip from, hey, that little bit of anxiety is giving me some motivation, over to here where it's like, this is super interfering with my life and makes me miserable? That's something only you can determine. But the first and most important reason to ever get help is if you feel like hurting yourself. Also, if it's interfering with your ability to function in work or school, if it's interfering with your relationships, and sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone and ask your significant other, am I too cranky? Like, how have things been lately? Are you walking on eggshells around me? You have to step out and have that open communication and have some objective person sometimes take a look in and talk to you about how your behavior has been. Because typically when you're depressed or anxious, you tend to kind of really focus inward and lose that ability to have the insight about how your behavior is affecting other people. Most of all, when it's interfering with your ability to enjoy life. We're here on earth to have joy. It's not supposed to be a miserable existence. So if you're in this state where things are miserable and you're having a terrible time, then we need to change that. So, just like any other medical disorder, when I treat high blood pressure, we have a little come to Jesus talk about, I can give you a pill. That'll drop your blood pressure by about 10 millimeters of mercury. That's why many people wind up on 3 or 4 blood pressure agents, because each one can only knock them down 7 to 10 millimeters of mercury. But we also talk about, if you take that pill and you're still dumping a teaspoon of salt on your dinner, and you're still smoking, and you're not exercising, and you're not losing weight, then the pill can only take you so much, so far, It's not going to do that good of a job. Same thing with diabetes. If I just handed someone a vial of insulin and said, this is the insulin you need, your pancreas is not making it for you. But I did not talk about carb counting or talking about how exercise impacts insulin uptake, or how to check their blood sugar and how to adjust their carb ratio and their carb count based on that, then I've totally failed as a clinician. This is the same thing with depression. We can throw a pill at it. Sometimes that's appropriate, but it's so much more than that. And in order for someone to be successful long-term, we need to focus on these other strategies as well. We're going to talk a lot more about self-care. That's just one little line for what will become a bigger category here. Counseling. I love counseling. And this is something that's scary and big and hard for a lot of people to jump into. I'm kind of assuming you guys have an employee assistance program here on campus available. That's great. Take advantage of it. I was talking to some nurses probably about a year ago, night shift chatter, 2 a.m. and things are calm and you're batting around stories about kind of war stories, the patient that kicked you and the patient that punched you and the patient that bit you and the time that you had someone hemorrhage to death and how hard that was. And we talked about how we all just suck it up. We're healthcare providers. We're strong enough. We're good enough. We don't need no stinking counseling, right? But then one of them confided that she actually had postpartum psychosis that was made a lot worse by the trauma she'd suffered at work. And so we asked her about her experience, and I asked her, do you think you would have gotten help if we had help on location? Like if you knew the counselor, like if they came around and actually talked to the employees and there was some rapport before you actually needed them? And she said, yes, I probably would have, but since our EAP is 10 miles away in a completely separate building and you have to schedule an appointment to go see them, not a single of the nurses that I worked with had ever taken advantage of that service, even though my employer offered it. And so, please, take advantage of it. Everyone can use counseling for something. This is something that I took my son to counseling when he was in the middle of his post-concussion and mood disorder issues. And the first counselor we went to was a really bad fit. This guy was nuts. And I've seen a lot of nutty people in my life, really. This guy was really nuts and a bad fit for him as a counselor. And my son was gracious enough to let me take him to a second counselor. And that guy was a much better fit. We'll talk more about counseling on the next slide. Medication can be part of the puzzle. It's not all of it. Managing, oops, sorry, I got trigger happy. Managing your chronic diseases and family and friend support is absolutely critical. If you don't feel like you can speak out and talk to your friends about what's going on in your head, then it's really hard to get better. You need someone that you can bounce those things off of, and someone that can be your guidance. Someone who's like, hey, I noticed that you're getting a little bit worse. Have you been in to see your counselor lately? What have you been doing lately to take care of yourself? You need someone that's outside of you to help give you that perspective. Spiritual support in whatever form that is for you, that's an important piece of this puzzle. Not all of it, but it's a significant part of it. And last of all, I'm getting to the age now where I feel like, back when I was your age, oh shoot, I guess I'm squarely middle-aged, but you think about the things that you go through in your life, and grief and those kinds of things change and mellow with time. They don't go away, but time helps. Time gives you perspective, it gives you more miles under your feet, more life under your belt, and it gives you perspective. This is my PIT principle. Sometimes we have a little upset in our life, a job change, or someone that's really ill, or whatever, some stressor in our life, and you have a little pit, and you can fill that pit by going out on a hike with your friend and then eating Ben and Jerry's with them, right? And you're like, I'm all better now. I just need that little boost. But sometimes your depression or your mood disorder looks like a deep, deep pit where you can't see the sunlight anymore. And it takes a lot of different things stacked up on top of them to help you get to where you can see that there's light again, and to where you can feel better. So back to this counseling idea. I went through counseling for the first time myself just last year, grief counseling from the loss of my daughter. And this is one of those things again where it's like, I'm a healthcare provider. I can counsel myself. I don't know how that works. It doesn't work. That's the thing. All those years later, it was still beneficial for me, 11 years after the fact, to go through grief counseling and to process some of those emotions. It can be hard work. If you're doing it right, you're opening up some old wounds and some hard stuff, and it gets worse before it gets better. So don't flee. Okay, stick with it, and you'll make remarkable progress. Stick with it. There's many different types of therapy. The most common is probably cognitive behavioral therapy. There's also dialectical behavioral therapy, and then EMDR, eye movement desensitization, is one that I prescribe a lot for people that have post-traumatic stress syndrome, because that's a tremendous way for people to be able to process those emotions and work through that. It's better than the other forms of counseling. Medication, like I said before, it may be part of your solution, but it's not the whole solution. If you walk in my office and you want me to just give you a pill and you hope that everything's magically fixed, then you can be sorely disappointed when they continue to talk about sleep hygiene and nutrition and exercise and all these other components that go with it. Most of the time, people start to feel better within a couple of weeks. It takes a little while to reassure the brain that you're getting things back in balance. And these medications, the SSRI class, things like Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac, and then we also have SNRI, that's the selective norepinephrine uptake inhibitors, that's like Effexor and Cymbalta. Ones that focus on dopamine, the most common one is Wellbutrin. What these do is they, when you have that synapse and your body's using serotonin to send a little message across, it recycles the serotonin. When there's not enough serotonin, then it recycles it really quickly because it's trying to make more available back here, then it doesn't leave it in that gap long enough. So these medications cause that recycling process to slow down a little bit so the serotonin or the norepinephrine or the dopamine can linger in that synaptic space longer to carry that message. Sometimes it takes some jiggering to figure out the right medication for people. There's some really amazing genetic testing that's available now. So for patients that I have that just like we've gone through 2 or 3 meds and we can't quite find the right fit for them, you can do genetic testing to see if they have an issue with how they metabolize certain medications. If they metabolize this one too quickly, so it just whizzes through their system and they don't get any benefit from it. Or if they metabolize this one really slowly and so it hangs around, makes them feel lots of side effects, and they don't get a lot of positive benefit from it. Most of the time, the side effects from these simmer down after the first couple of weeks. So I always warn people, you might have some sleep disturbances, you might have some nausea. All this stuff usually resolves within a couple of weeks. Oh. There we go. Let's talk about your gut health. If any of you are curious about this, I really, really recommend that you look up Mark Hyman, Hyman, on the internet. He has this series of lectures going on right now that are being released piece by piece, just for a base. We're kind of in the middle of it right now. You can purchase it. He's an evangelist for gut health and how that impacts. And he has a powerful story of his own, how he's diagnosed with ADD and anxiety, depression, all these things, working in his residency, and how he figured out really that it was mistreatment of his guts. And by feeding yourself nourishing things, and I know that that's the thing you focus on here at USANA, is you want to help people be healthier. This is the key. We already discussed how you have billions of bacteria in your gut that do lots of things, but one of the really important things they do is they make those neurotransmitters. You need to stop eating the SAD diet. That's the standard American diet. So that's all the crap, all the preservatives, all the sugar, all the caffeine. One of the things that some of the experts in his video series propose is that everyone is sensitive to gluten. Every single one of us. Gluten opens the gap junctions in your intestinal wall, the spacing between the cells to let stuff leak out. The difference between someone who's celiac and someone who's not is the duration of how long it stays open and how much damage there is to it. So, kind of an interesting thing. And you should consider a probiotic. The doctor that I work with that owns our practice, I've never met anyone who consumes more vegetables than that man. Like they just plates and plates full of it. And when we have staff meetings, there's no such thing as Bagel Monday. It's like, here's your quinoa casserole Monday. So that's great. We're all learning how to be more healthy. But he tells all his patients, you should eat 5 servings of veggies before you eat any fruit in a day. Fruit is sugar. If you want to keep your guts happy, stick with the veggies. Let's talk about what self-care looks like. Number 1 is exercise. And I don't care what you do for exercise. You can belly dance for all I care. Do something. Motion is lotion. Keeps you moving, keeps your circulation good, keeps your joints loose and flexible. But most importantly, it gives you a little dump of dopamine, a little endorphin rush. Get that naturally from your exercise. Makes you feel good. Okay, so just carve out a way, baby steps. Start little, work your way up. But if you can get in the habit of regular exercise, that's one of the quickest ways to boost your mood. Sleep hygiene is incredibly important. Who in this room gets between 5 and 6 hours of sleep most nights? Okay. Who gets between 6 and 7? Okay. Not too bad. How about 7 to 8? Hey, I'm glad to see that. Who gets more than 8 every night? You lucky, lucky man. Who gets less than 5 on a pretty regular basis? Okay. There's a few. You know what that does to your brain? Lets all the garbage build up. And there's tons of research that shows us that that puts you on the path to Alzheimer's and lots of other neurologic dysfunction. You cannot expect your brain to function when it doesn't get enough sleep. And I worked night shift for 17 years, and it does bad things to your body, and I totally sympathize. Being a student, all those things. But one of the things I've learned as I've aged, that I just have to prioritize sleep. And that means going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at about the same time. And just being really mindful of what you do in that hour before bed, avoiding screens, those things. Good nutrition, we already talked about that. Education, so that means understanding what's going on in your body. Congratulations, you're doing that today, good job. Mindful meditation is incredible. And same with gratitude journaling and those positive self-talk, all those things change your thinking. Having structure in your schedule. Someone who's really depressed, if they don't have a reason to get out of bed and put their clothes on, they just won't, right? So if you're in a bad place, then have a friend that you can always call and say, hey, please make me meet you for lunch today so I have to put clothes on and be like a grown-up, okay? So having some structure in your schedule is a good thing. Not too much. You don't want to pump your schedule too much. You need to have something in there. And really, really most importantly is this concept of avoiding self-medicating. with destructive behaviors or substances. Okay, so being mindful, like I just really want that whole tub of ice cream, but that's probably not the best thing for me. You know, I want to drink this whole bottle of wine, but I know that that's self-destructive behavior, and that's not going to be good in the long run. So I have the oxygen mask here because you got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people in your life. I want to talk about this concept of self-compassion. This was something I learned from the counselor that I saw. By nature of being in the healthcare field, I have this need to nurture, a need to take care of everyone else, but it's hard to take care of myself. Okay? I'm giving you permission right now to carve out time to take care of yourself. Once I reach that realization that I have to just do that, or else I don't function well, and things have been a lot smoother in our family life. I love this quote that says, self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. So someone who's having a hard time with self-compassion has this internal dialogue of, I'm not good enough. I'm a lousy provider. I'm a bad wife. You know, I'm whatever. Other people don't like me. I'm stinky, I'm ugly, I'm dirty, I'm fat, whatever, those kinds of things. Now, if you said that out loud to your friend and you said, I'm stinky, I'm ugly, and I'm a terrible person, would they say, you're totally right. You are the worst person I've ever met. No. They come back and say, wait, are you kidding? Oh my gosh, no, I know you're having a bad day, but you are so talented. You have all these things you can give. So this is this concept of giving yourself that same courtesy. Changing the way your brain thinks, changing that dialogue, and gratitude journaling is one of the ways that you can do that. This is just more on the self-compassion. Kristen Neff has some TED Talks on YouTube that are really good about this concept. I like this idea that when you can learn how to love yourself and be kind to yourself, that's a key to happiness. You can still wallow a bit, for lack of a better term here. This concept of, like, we've all had bad things, so you're allowed to wallow a little bit, share your wallowing a bit, and that lifts you, should lift and strengthen you. This idea that we've all gone through hard things rather than dragging you down further. And an important component of that is to acknowledge your suffering without exaggerating it. So, yes, I've had hard things happen to me, really bad things. I can acknowledge that, I can wallow in it a little bit, but then we've got to move on and say there's other things that you can do, good things you can do, and not let that drag you down. So, let's just talk real quick. We're running short on time. I like this cartoon. We have a hard time as a society talking about mental health issues. For some reason, everyone likes to post their vomit stories on Instagram or Facebook. It's actually really useful for me from an epidemiologic standpoint. So people say, hey, is there a BART program in the neighborhood? Like, yeah, 4 of my neighbors. I posted about it on Facebook. So yep, it's going around. But we have a hard time with mental health issues. So I want you to think, before you talk to someone about this, think about phrases that may not be helpful. These are some of the things that might pop into your head, but take that prefrontal cortex into action and let it filter these things, and don't let them come out of your mouth. The first thing is to say it's all in your head. No, it's in my head and my guts. You're half right. We all go through times like this. This is that long legs theory. 2 of you may have gone through the same thing. One of you has muddy ankles, the other one has mud up to their chin. Okay, so you can't compare your experience. Look at the bright side. You have so much to live for. Why do you want to die? I can't do anything about your situation. Just snap out of it. What's wrong with you? And shouldn't you be better than that? Nobody ever says, shouldn't your hypertension be cured by now? Like, I'm tired of you having hypertension or osteoporosis. It's really boring that you have osteoporosis. There's not a time limit on that. Okay, there's not a time limit on mental health disorders either. Things that you can say instead is be the person that's willing to reach out and open that conversation. I've just noticed that you've been down lately. Is everything okay? I want to check. I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. I'm here for you. You won't always feel this way. Sometimes when people are down in that deep pit, they just need someone to show them that there's light at the top. They can't see the light anymore themselves. They need someone to tell them that they will get out of that. What do you think might help you feel better? And really think about when someone, like say someone in your family died, and everyone says, let me know if there's anything I can do. Okay, well, I can't even figure out how to put my shoes on today. How am I gonna think of something that I can call you for to ask you to do for me? So come up with something concrete you can suggest to them. One of the things I would strongly suggest is say, hey, I'd be happy to schedule an appointment for you at the clinic, and I'll even go to the clinic with you. Because that feels like a really, really big, hard thing to pick up the phone and schedule an appointment for depression or for anxiety at the medical clinic or with a psychologist. That's a really important sort of thing you can do. Another person that I love for some examples on vulnerability and empathy is Brene Brown. If you have the opportunity, she has a little video on empathy, and her little video shows the person down in the pit, and the person has sympathy, comes over to the edge of the pit and looks down and says, boy, it sure looks dark down there. Sorry you're having a bad day, and then moves on. And the person that shows empathy climbs down in the pit with the person, puts their arm around them with a little candle and says, let's get out of this together. Okay, so in this example we have up here, someone says sympathy like, oh, I'm sorry your teddy bear's arm is ripped off. And the empathetic person comes along with a needle and thread and is ready to help. So be a doer, not just a sayer when it comes to supporting someone with mental illness. These are some really useful phrases for people, and these are for calming an anxious child, but I'd say that they're even useful for calming adults. Maybe not the let's draw a picture part, but the other ones, these are really important because again, they have a hard time putting into words what's going on in your head. And you can have a kid that's having a meltdown over a broken crayon. And over time, as you do this over and over, you can teach them like, how big is your worry? Is a broken crayon this big of a worry? Or is it a little worry that's making you feel really upset? But it's a little worry. So it's teaching them how to kind of, to calm that, to put that into some perspective. Tell me about it. How big is your worry? What do you want to tell your worry? That would be like, go away, you big screen, you big scary green monster, you know, don't come back until I tell you so, those kinds of things. Let's change the ending. You're safe. For a kid that's afraid of spiders, could be, what else do you know about spiders? And then you can dig in and research, and that takes a lot of fear out of it. So these are really useful phrases to have in your back pocket. I really recommend using a mindfulness app if meditation doesn't come easily to you. There's tons of free apps. These are just two that I found, and they run you through a series of meditations. This can be a great way to wind down at the end of the day. We have ones that are as short as 3 minutes. So if you're in a place at work where you're really riled up, or with your family, and you just need 3 minutes of calm, go lock yourself in the bathroom and do a 3-minute meditation, and you'll feel better. Okay? We also have some book recommendations. I recommend these two on the right. Often they're workbooks, things to help you. It's kind of self-help oriented. I don't want to say that it replaces counseling. It doesn't, but it's a good way to augment that to help you change that internal dialogue and increase your self-compassion. Here's some suicide resources. How many of you are familiar with the Safe UT app? Okay, I want you to look it up. This is something you should have loaded on your phone, whether it's for all ages. It's a way to access social workers at uni any time of the day or the night. You can call them, you can text them, you can do it through the app. The app just gives you a nice, everything in one place kind of access to it. And also you set up a PIN so that you're the only person that knows how to open that. So like for teens, especially if when their friends grabbed their phone and picked it up, they wouldn't be able to open that conversation and spam the social worker, some things. This has saved the life of 2 kids in my neighborhood. Literally saved their life. In one case, it was like midnight, and the kid woke his mom up like, I'm just freaking out. I want to hurt myself. I want to die. I don't want to live. And they sat and texted the social worker for about 2.5, 3 hours, and the social worker set up an appointment for first thing in the morning up at uni, so they were able to bypass the emergency room. They went right to that appointment, and he was admitted for 9 days while they stabilized him. So this is a critically important resource for you to know. For people that don't have smartphones, they don't know download apps or they don't want to, you can always text START to 741-741, and it goes to the same people. These people are busy night and day, all the time, because people are in crisis. And it's a sad commentary, so that's the truth. If you feel like someone's imminently in danger of hurting themselves, the quickest way to access help is to take them to the emergency room. If they won't come with you willingly and you really feel like they've got a gun to their head and they're really, really in a bad place, call 911. I'd say at least 20% of the emergency or the EMS calls are for mental health crises. And I'd like to just finish with a word of encouragement. Don't you quit. You keep walking and you keep trying. There's health and happiness ahead. All of us go through bumps in life, lots of ups and downs. Sometimes it's easier to pull out than others, and sometimes you need a little bit of help. So I hope that at least something from this presentation is to help you for you. And we'll get these slides over to my folks and email them out for everyone to have. That's all I have.
Well, thanks again, Heidi. Just a reminder, be sure and sign in and sign up for the activity on USANA, and we'll see you next month for our next Lunch and Learn. Thank you.